All right, so today we're going to deep dive into some pretty out there stuff. Project Bluebeam.
Yeah,
Sounds like a sci-fi movie, right?
it does.
We got a bunch of listener questions about this after a video popped up on YouTube.
Oh, yeah.
This video is an interview
Okay.
that's in Russian, and it features this woman named Alla.
Hmm.
Now get this. She claims to reveal all about this supposed Project Bluebeam through hypnotic regression.
Hypnotic regression. Yeah, it's really interesting, but it's also pretty controversial. Like, on the one hand, it's supposed to unlock hidden memories, but can we really be sure that those memories are accurate?
Yeah, that's a great point. I mean, are they real memories or are they just kind of
Yeah.
fabricated?
Yeah, or influenced by the hypnotist.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Big question mark there.
And it
Big
is.
question mark. So we're going into this with like a healthy dose of skepticism.
Of course.
But even with that skepticism, Alala's story, it's got to be said, is full of some attention-grabbing details. We're talking about space stations, aliens, mind control, and like a race against time to preserve free will.
It's giving summer blockbuster.
It really is.
Yeah.
So let's break this down. According to Alla, what exactly is Project Bluebeam?
Well, so she says it's this project
Okay.
that uses technology called Bluebeam, and supposedly this technology is like gifted
Okay.
to us from some unnamed extraterrestrial civilization.
Aliens.
Yeah, aliens.
Okay.
And it's all about manipulating and controlling human minds. So we're talking like reading brain activity, altering it, influencing thoughts, emotions, even actions.
Okay, hold on. Aliens are giving us mind control technology.
That's what she's saying.
But why? Like, what's their angle in all of this?
Yeah, that's a really good question. She doesn't go into a lot of detail about like what the aliens are hoping to get out of this, but she says that the goal of the project is to gain control over humanity.
Okay.
So basically, suppressing free will and pushing people towards agendas that they wouldn't necessarily choose on their own.
That sounds kind of like a classic conspiracy theory, right?
Yeah, it definitely has those vibes. But let's not dismiss it just yet. I mean, who does she say is actually pulling the strings here on Earth? Is this like a shady government agency?
Right, because that's what I would think. Some like Men in Black type situation.
Well, interestingly, she initially says that it's not government run,
Oh.
but it's actually a collaboration between powerful private companies
Yeah.
and these aliens.
Okay.
And she even drops some names. Elon Musk.
Oh, wow.
And then she says, the man who invented the egg. I'm assuming she means Jeff Bezos
Right.
as being like financially involved.
So we're talking tech giants bankrolling mind control with help from aliens? I mean, that's a pretty wild claim. What evidence does she give to back that up?
Unfortunately, she doesn't really give a lot of evidence.
Okay.
It's mostly just her saying that this is what's happening.
All right.
But she does lay out what she claims is like a multi-phased plan that has supposedly evolved over time.
Hold on. Phases? Like it's some supervillain's like step-by-step guide to world domination?
It does cast like that, doesn't it?
It does.
So she says originally it was only 4 phases.
Okay.
But because of leaks and growing awareness, they had to expand it to 8 phases.
Okay.
And she says that currently we're in the 5th phase, which is all about making people more susceptible to this blue beam technology.
How are they doing that? Are they like handing out free tinfoil hats?
Not quite. She says they're exploiting our existing anxieties and uncertainties that are already in society,
Right.
which makes us all more vulnerable to manipulation.
I mean, that's a pretty fascinating idea, though. When you think about it, we see that in the real world all the time.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
I mean, like fear and uncertainty, it can definitely make people more susceptible to persuasion, even if the message is completely bogus.
Exactly. I mean, think about wartime propaganda.
Oh, yeah.
Or even targeted advertising today.
Right.
The methods might be different, but that underlying principle is the same. You know, exploit existing fears
Right.
and anxieties to make people receptive to whatever your message is.
It's kind of a chilling thought.
It is.
So, if Alla's right, and this project has been going on for a while now, who was the first to blow the whistle on it?
So Ella talks about this French-Canadian journalist named Serge Monast,
Okay.
who supposedly exposed Project Bluebeam back in 1994.
1994. Okay.
But he died of a heart attack just 2 years later.
Okay. And I bet Alla doesn't think that was a coincidence.
You're exactly right. She claims he was deliberately targeted by the Bluebeam as punishment for exposing this project.
Wow.
And she even goes as far as to say that his soul was captured and his ethereal DNA was manipulated. Whatever that means.
Ethereal DNA. I don't even know what that's supposed to be, but it definitely sounds creepy. It seems like she's trying to make this technology sound as powerful and dangerous as possible.
It definitely adds to the scariness of the story.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
So we've got aliens, tech billionaires, mind control,
Yeah.
and a journalist who dies after exposing the truth. It's like a movie.
It really is.
So what does she say about, like, the end game here? Are we all doomed to become mindless puppets controlled by this blue beam technology?
You know, it's funny because actually she believes that this project will ultimately fail and that it'll collapse by the year 2038.
Really?
Yeah. She doesn't really give a reason why, but she does really emphasize the importance of individual free will.
Okay.
And she urges people to reject manipulation and think for themselves. So she seems to be suggesting that, like, growing awareness and resistance is going to lead to this project's downfall.
So even in the face of this, like, super terrifying technology, she believes humanity has a fighting chance.
That seems to be her message.
Okay.
That the more people that become aware of this Project Bluebeam and the more we resist it, the less effective it will become.
I mean, it's a nice thought.
It is a nice thought.
But, like, is there any truth to any of this?
Right.
Could something like this blue beam technology actually exist?
Right. That's what we need to look into next.
Yeah, exactly.
I mean,
'Cause that's the big question.
it sounds like science fiction.
It does.
But is it?
Right. So that's what we'll get into in part 2 of this deep dive into Project Bluebeam.
Yeah, that is the million-dollar question, isn't it?
It is.
Could this blue beam technology actually exist?
I mean,
it sounds like it's right out of science fiction.
yeah, total sci-fi.
But there are some things happening in the real world, like with neuroscience and technology, that kind of make you wonder.
Yeah, like, what kind of things are we talking about? Is there any actual science to back this up?
Yeah, well, the idea of, like, remotely controlling someone's thoughts and actions, that might seem pretty far-fetched. I mean, it does to me.
Yeah.
But there is some research out there that kind of touches on the possibility of being able to influence brain activity.
Okay, like what? What kind of research?
Well, for example, there's a lot of work being done with brain-computer interfaces.
Right, like those devices that allow people with, like, paralysis to control robotic limbs with their thoughts.
Exactly.
Yeah, that technology is amazing.
It is.
But is that really a step towards, like, the kind of mind control that Allah's describing?
Well, it's important to remember that there's a difference between reading brain activity and actually controlling it.
Okay.
So brain-computer interfaces,
Right.
they can detect and interpret certain brain signals.
Right.
But we're a long way from being able to actually manipulate someone's thoughts or actions remotely.
Okay. So while we can read some brain activity, we're not anywhere close to the kind of manipulation that Allah is talking about.
Right.
Okay. But what about manipulating people's emotions and thoughts through things like social media and, the internet? I mean, we know that algorithms can target people with very specific content.
Right.
Sometimes even stuff that preys on their anxieties and fears.
Absolutely. I mean, think about it. We live in a world with just constant information.
Yeah, it's overload.
It's totally overloaded.
Yeah.
And algorithms are definitely used to personalize our online experiences.
Right, and, like, track our browsing history,
Exactly.
our likes and dislikes, even our location.
That's a little creepy when you stop and think about it.
It is. Like those ads that follow you around everywhere you go online after you look at a certain product.
Yeah.
But is that really mind control?
Well, it's definitely a form of influence.
Hmm.
And there's actually a growing amount of research that shows how these algorithms can really shape our opinions and our beliefs and even our behaviors.
Right.
But even the most advanced algorithms aren't doing what Allah's saying.
Right.
They're not, like, directly controlling our minds. They're not implanting thoughts
Right.
or forcing people to act against their will.
Right. It's more like subtle suggestions.
Exactly. It's all about presenting information in a way that's meant to be persuasive. So it's more about suggestion than control.
Right. But I feel like that line can get pretty blurry, especially when you consider the emotional impact of the information that's being presented.
Absolutely. Think about how social media can be used to spread, like, misinformation or propaganda.
Right.
By playing on people's fears and anxieties, these messages can be really powerful, even if they're totally false.
So while there are some parallels, I guess you could say,
Between, like, real-world technology and what we know about psychology,
right.
this whole Project Bluebeam thing just seems to take things to a whole other level.
I think that's fair to say. I mean, it's really important to be skeptical of these kinds of claims.
Yeah, for
And
sure.
I think even if we put aside the most outlandish parts of her story, there are still some really interesting things to think about.
Like what?
Well, like, what happens when technology gets so advanced that it starts to blur the line between persuasion and manipulation?
Yeah, that's a good question.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, we're already seeing examples of deep fakes and AI-generated content that are like almost impossible to distinguish from the real thing.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And as these technologies keep advancing, it's going to get harder and harder to figure out what's real and what's fake.
Right, like what is truth anymore?
Exactly.
Like it's that old saying, if a tree falls in the forest and no one is around to hear it, does it make a sound?
Right.
But now it's like, if a video is faked perfectly, so it's like impossible to tell that it's not real.
Yeah,
Did it really happen?
that's such a good point. Yeah, it's kind of freaky.
Yeah, it really is.
It really is. So while Project Bluebeam might just be this crazy conspiracy theory,
Yeah.
it does bring up some important questions about how these technologies could potentially impact us,
I think so too.
like our individual consciousness, but also like our collective consciousness.
Absolutely. And it's not just about misinformation or fake news.
Right.
There's also this whole other issue of how technology could be used to exploit our psychological vulnerabilities.
Which is kind of what Alala was getting at when she talked about exploiting anxieties and uncertainties.
Exactly.
Yeah, she said they're using that stuff to make people more susceptible to this blue beam technology. Do you think there's any truth to that? Like, could our own fears actually be used against us in that way?
I think it's definitely possible. I mean, we've already talked about how algorithms can be used to target people with certain types of content.
Right.
But imagine if those algorithms were combined with technology that could actually read and interpret our emotions in real time.
That sounds terrifying, like something straight out of Black Mirror.
It does, doesn't it?
Does that technology actually exist?
Well, there's this whole field of research called affective computing.
Okay.
And it focuses on developing systems that can recognize, interpret, and even simulate human emotions.
Hold on. So you're talking about computers that can, like, read our minds?
Well, not exactly read our minds.
Okay.
Not in the traditional sense.
Okay.
But they can pick up on subtle cues like our facial expressions,
Okay.
our voice tone,
Okay.
and even like physiological changes,
Like what?
like our heart rate and how much we're sweating.
So they can tell when we're lying.
Potentially, yeah.
That is both amazing and super creepy.
It's
What could they even do with that information, though?
Well, that's where things get really interesting and maybe a little bit scary.
Okay.
Imagine a world where advertisers can tailor their messages to your exact emotional state
Uh-huh.
in real time.
Okay.
Or where political campaigns can like target voters based on their deepest fears and anxieties.
Yeah, okay, no, that is a very dystopian picture.
It is a bit dystopian.
So what can we even do about it? Are we just destined to be, like, manipulated by all this increasingly sophisticated technology?
Well, I don't think so. I think the key is awareness.
Okay.
The more we know about these technologies and how they work, the better equipped we'll be to recognize and resist them.
So it's about educating ourselves.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Knowledge is power. But even then, it feels like a bit of an arms race.
Right.
You know, as soon as we catch on to one tactic, they come up with something even more advanced.
Yeah, that's true. It's a little overwhelming.
It is.
But I guess it's a race worth running.
I think so, too.
The stakes are just too high.
Right. Our individual freedom and autonomy are on the line.
Exactly. Speaking of which, we haven't talked much about Serge Monast, the journalist who Allah claims exposed Project Bluebeam back in the 90s.
Right.
Allah says he died under mysterious circumstances,
Yeah.
just a couple of years after going public with his claims. Is there any truth to that?
Well, so Serge Monast was a journalist and a conspiracy theorist.
Okay.
And he was pretty well known in the 90s for his writing about the New World Order and other conspiracy theories.
Okay.
So Project Bluebeam was just one of many theories that he was promoting.
So he was already into conspiracy theories before he started talking about Project Bluebeam.
Yeah, he'd already published several books and articles on a bunch of different conspiracy theories before he came out with his report on Project Bluebeam in 1994.
Gotcha.
He believed that there was this, like, powerful elite
Okay.
that was using advanced technology to control the minds of everyone
Okay.
and bring about, like, a one-world government.
So the classic New World Order conspiracy theory,
yeah.
but with a technological twist.
Exactly.
Okay, so what did he think Project Bluebeam was all about?
So he claimed that it involved using holographic projections,
Okay.
subliminal messaging, and all these other techniques
Wow.
to basically create a fake alien invasion.
A fake alien invasion.
Yeah. Or like some other global catastrophe.
That's rad.
That would force everyone to unite under a single totalitarian regime.
So he's saying they're going to fake an alien invasion to take over the world.
That was his theory.
Okay, so now we're adding fake alien invasions to this whole thing.
Right.
It's getting pretty hard to keep track of all these layers.
I know it's a lot.
It is.
But it's important to note that Monast's claims, like Allah's, they don't have any real evidence to back them up.
Okay.
And his death, while it's definitely sad, appears to have been from natural causes.
But Allah claims that his soul was captured
Right.
and that his ethereal DNA was manipulated.
Yeah, it's a really disturbing thought.
It is.
But we have to remember that those are just claims. There's no evidence to support them.
Okay, so we need to take all of this with a grain of salt.
Definitely.
But it still makes you wonder, right?
It does.
Could there be some truth buried within all these outlandish claims?
Mm-hmm.
Could there be forces out there, even if they're not aliens or some shadowy group that are trying to manipulate us?
It's a really unsettling thought that our minds could be manipulated so easily.
Yeah.
That our thoughts and emotions could be controlled by forces that we can't even see.
Yeah.
Especially with technology advancing so quickly.
Yeah.
And it's getting harder to tell the difference between reality and illusion.
Yeah, it's like, where do you even draw the line?
That's a good question.
It really is.
Yeah.
Allah claims that Project Bluebeam is going to fail.
Right.
That it's going to collapse by 2038 because people are becoming more aware and more resistant to it. Do you see any signs of that happening? Like, are people actually waking up to the possibility that they're being manipulated?
It's hard to say for sure.
Right.
I mean, on the one hand, we are seeing more and more people who are aware of how technology can be used to manipulate us.
Okay.
People are getting more skeptical of what they see online.
Right.
And there's a growing movement for more transparency and accountability from tech companies.
So that's good.
It is a good sign.
Right. So we're not all just heading for this dystopian future where our minds are controlled by algorithms and, all these shadowy figures.
I wouldn't say we're out of the woods just yet.
Okay.
Because the people behind these technologies, they're also getting more sophisticated.
Right.
They're always coming up with new ways to influence our thoughts and behaviors.
Right, like a constant cat and mouse game.
Exactly.
It feels very David and Goliath.
It does a bit.
The average person trying to hold their own against these powerful forces with unlimited resources.
It can feel that way sometimes, but I think awareness is our most powerful tool.
Okay.
The more we understand how these technologies work, the better we'll be at resisting their influence.
Okay, so what can we do then? How can we actually protect ourselves from being manipulated?
Well, for starters, I think we need to be really good critical thinkers.
Okay.
We can't just accept everything we see and hear, especially online.
So don't believe everything you read on the internet.
Exactly.
Even if it sounds really convincing.
Even if it sounds really convincing. We need to be skeptical.
Okay.
Especially when it comes from sources that we don't know.
Right.
Fact check everything.
Right.
Do your research. And be careful of those really sensational headlines.
Right, the clickbait.
Yeah, the clickbait.
Okay, so be skeptical and do your research.
Right.
What else?
And we also need to be aware of our own biases.
Okay.
And how they can be exploited.
So confirmation bias.
Exactly. Confirmation bias is this tendency to believe information that already aligns with what we already believe.
Right.
Even if it's not actually true.
Right, so even if it's BS.
Even if it's BS.
We're more likely to believe it if it fits in with our existing worldview.
Exactly.
So basically, we need to be more open-minded.
Yes.
More curious and willing to kind of question everything, even our own beliefs.
I think that's so important.
Yeah. It's a tall order.
It is a tall order.
But it sounds like it's important.
It is.
And I guess finally, we have to be really careful about protecting our privacy and data.
Absolutely. I mean, the more information these companies have about us, the easier it is for them to try and manipulate us.
So be mindful of what we share online.
Yes.
Read privacy policies.
Yes.
Use tools like VPNs and ad blockers.
All good things.
All that good stuff.
Yes.
It's a lot to keep track of.
It is.
But it's important.
It is.
This whole conversation about mind control and manipulation, it's a lot. It can be pretty overwhelming.
Yeah, it's heavy stuff.
You start to feel powerless when you think about all these technologies.
I get that. But I really believe that we have more power than we think.
So?
Well, because we have the power to choose what we believe.
Okay.
What we pay attention to.
Yeah.
And how we respond to the information that we encounter.
So it's all about taking back control of our own minds.
I think that's a great way to put it.
Okay.
It's about recognizing that we actually do have a choice.
Okay.
In how we engage with the world around us, even in the digital age.
Okay, so we've covered a lot here.
We have.
We've talked about the claims of Project Bluebeam. We talked about the science behind mind control.
Yeah.
The role of technology in shaping our thoughts and emotions, the importance of critical thinking and awareness.
Absolutely.
So what's the takeaway here?
Right.
What's the one thing that we want our listeners to remember from all of this?
Well, I think the biggest takeaway is that we have to be vigilant.
Okay.
We need to be aware of how technology can be used to influence us.
Right.
And we need to take steps to protect ourselves.
Okay, so even if we don't buy into all the details of Project Bluebeam,
Right.
there are still some valuable lessons to be learned here.
Absolutely. This idea that powerful forces are using technology to control our minds, that's a warning we should all pay attention to.
Even if it's not aliens and blue beams.
That could be anybody.
Right. It could be governments,
Corporations.
political parties,
Yeah.
even individuals.
Right. Anyone who benefits from manipulating us.
Exactly. And the tools they're using are getting more and more advanced.
Right. It's up to all of us to be aware of these tactics and to learn how to resist them.
So what can we do? What are some actual steps people can take to protect themselves?
Well, first, we need to be careful about the information we consume.
Okay.
We need to think critically about the sources,
Right.
check facts, and be wary of things that sound too good to be true or too scary to ignore.
So don't believe everything you read on the internet.
That's a good rule of thumb.
Okay, what else?
We also need to be aware of our own biases,
Okay.
how they can be used against us.
Like confirmation bias.
Exactly. We need to be open to different perspectives and be willing to challenge our own assumptions.
Okay, so be open-minded and question everything.
Exactly. And finally, we need to be really proactive about protecting our privacy and our data.
Okay.
The more information companies have about us, the easier it is for them to manipulate us.
So be careful what you share online.
Yes.
Read privacy policies.
Yes.
Use tools like VPNs and ad blockers.
All great steps to take.
So in the digital age, our data is like our currency.
It is. And we need to be careful about who we're giving it to.
Absolutely.
It's a lot,
It is.
but it's important.
It is.
This has been a fascinating and kind of unsettling deep dive.
It really has.
It's definitely given me a lot to think about.
Me too.
What about you?
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's a really good reminder that we live in a world where the line between reality and what's fake is getting blurrier all the time.
Right.
And the power of technology to influence our minds is just growing exponentially.
So what's our final takeaway for our listeners? What's the one thing we want them to remember from all of this?
I think the most important takeaway is this. Your mind is your most valuable asset. Protect it.
That's a really deep question. Like, if technology can actually influence our minds in ways that we're not even aware of, how can we really know if we're in control of our own thoughts and beliefs?
It really is a bit of a paradox. Like, if our choices and actions are being influenced, even in like a subtle way, can we really say we have free will? It's a question that's been around forever. Yeah. Philosophers have been debating this for centuries.
Right.
And while we're probably not going to solve it here today, it is kind of unsettling to think about.
Yeah, for sure.
That we might be influenced in ways we don't even recognize.
Absolutely. But I think the important thing here is not to get too hung up on the philosophy of it all.
Right.
And instead, focus on what we can actually do to protect ourselves.
Okay.
Even if we can't always be 100% sure if we're being influenced or not.
So what's our defense strategy? If we can't always see the manipulation, how do we protect ourselves against it?
Well, I think a lot of it comes back to what we've already talked about. Critical thinking,
Right.
media literacy, and just being aware of our own biases.
So basically, don't just passively absorb information.
Exactly.
Question everything, look for evidence, and try to consider different perspectives.
Exactly. And pay attention to emotional appeals.
Yeah.
Like if something makes you feel really angry or really scared or even really excited, just pause for a second and ask yourself, why is this how you genuinely feel about the information? Or is something amplifying your reaction?
Right. Or is it being manipulated in some way?
Right.
That's a good point. Like those clickbait headlines you see all over the place online.
Yeah.
They're designed to trigger you.
Right. To get you to click without really thinking.
Exactly. They prey on our fears and desires.
Yeah, it's totally true.
And once you start to see those tactics for what they are, they become much less effective.
It's like you're seeing behind the curtain.
Exactly.
Or like seeing the Matrix code.
I love that analogy.
Once you see it, you can't unsee it.
Right. And it just shows you how important knowledge is.
Okay.
The more we know about how our minds work and how people can try to influence them,
Yeah.
the better we can resist manipulation.
So let's give our listeners some practical advice. What can people actually do to build up those mental defenses?
Okay, well, first and foremost, we need to cultivate a healthy sense of skepticism.
Okay.
Don't just believe everything you read or hear, especially online.
Even if it comes from a source you think is trustworthy.
Especially then.
Always double-check information. Look for confirmation from different sources and be wary of anything that sounds too sensational or too good to be true.
So basically fact-check everything. Don't just take it at face value.
Exactly. Second, diversify your information sources.
Yeah.
Don't just get all your news and information from the same places, especially not from sources that just echo your existing beliefs.
So break out of your echo chamber.
Exactly. It's great to have strong opinions, but you should always be open to hearing other perspectives, even if you disagree with them.
Yeah, that makes sense.
It helps you see the world in a nuanced way.
Plus, you might even learn something new.
Exactly, or change your mind about something.
Which can be a good thing.
Exactly. It's all about learning and growing.
Okay, that's number 2. Diversify those sources. What's number 3?
Be mindful of your emotional state. Especially when you're online, if you're feeling overwhelmed, anxious, or angry, just take a break from the news and social media.
Because those are the times when we're most vulnerable to manipulation.
Exactly. When we're not thinking clearly and our emotions are heightened,
Right.
take a break. Go for a walk. Listen to some music. Hang out with people you love.
Right.
Do something to ground yourself.
Great advice. So to recap our 3 tips for resisting mind control, whether it's aliens, tech giants, or just everyday algorithms are: be skeptical, diversify your information, and be mindful of your emotions.
I think that's a great summary.
Okay, so this has been a wild ride.
I think it has.
We went from alien conspiracies to the deep philosophical questions about free will.
It's been a journey.
And I gotta say, I'm feeling a little more cautious about all the information out there now.
I think that's a good thing, though.
Yeah, I think so too.
This whole deep dive wasn't meant to scare anyone.
Right.
It was about making us all more aware and helping us be more critical thinkers.
Yeah, exactly. And to everyone listening, we hope you got some good insights out of this.
Yeah.
And some tools to help you navigate this crazy world of information and technology. Remember, knowledge is power, and critical thinking is your best weapon against manipulation.
Couldn't have said it better myself.
Stay curious, stay skeptical, and stay informed